Galene Woman knows why self-care includes the tough things too. Hello everyone, I'm Cole and this is your weekly self-care fill-in with the Galene Woman Is podcast, where your care and peace is at the top of our to-do list. It's the favourite space to discuss all things cozy, calming and ultimately just for you. Of course, a requirement of this podcast is to take this time, this 25 minutes or so, just for you. Do something that will make you feel comfy and happy and fulfilled. Currently, I am trying a new chamomile tea, which is actually awesome. And I did an amazing yoga session this morning. So come join me in this self-care filled world and give yourself some love, because I can guarantee it's well deserved. Today's episode is a little different in that we're discussing more about what actually is self-care and how that looks in your life. As I'm sure you've gathered by now, though I am a huge advocate of rest and mindfulness in your everyday life, I'm also very, very aware that sometimes self-care can look quite different. Galene will always be your space to relax, recharge, and properly take rest that might not be so easy to do. But recently, I've been receiving a few comments and questions on when you know what kind of self-care you actually need and when you should put off your self-care and focus on a task instead. It's a very, very tricky question and one I've mulled over many a time, especially now that I'm running Galene and studying, of which both take up a lot of my time. I've definitely come to the opinion that true self-care is acknowledging when you need to step out of your comfort zone and, do that one thing you've been neglecting and you really need to do and needs to be done to maintain your peace of mind. Because that's what self-care comes back to, keeping and cultivating your most calm and caring self. When we're thinking about self-care conventionally, of course this is the fun, relaxing side of it all. Of course we're all sat here thinking of a bubble bath or quiet reading or taking calm walks through nature. Everyone has got their thing that they love that really helps them de-stress and just chill for a bit. And if you don't, it is really worth spending time finding out what that is. But what about the days when, you have bills that are overdue and you keep putting off calling the people to help you sort it out? Or what about when you've had an incredibly, incredibly difficult and bad argument with someone that you love? What about if you've had a health scare and now you have to stick to a very, very rigid routine on things that you've never done before? Life is incredibly tough. We all know this. There is always something that could happen to knock you down or put you in a bad mood or just really friggin' stress you out. And while lying in a hot bath may feel good temporarily and may help ease your personal nerves, and you should absolutely do it, it won't solve the problem. So how can the concept of self-care, your daily recharges, relaxation and maintenance of your peace help you manage tough and complicated things that will inevitably crop up in life? I think it's that last bit we should focus on, keeping your peace. From personal experience, it's always just easier to have the conversation, do the task you should have done 3 days ago, or finish that little work thing just before the end of the day. I used to be very, very good at avoiding things that I didn't want to do. I wouldn't be upfront with friends or my partners if there was a problem. I'd leave college work until the day before, which is such a bad idea, and I would work myself up when I could have absolutely dealt with it beforehand. But we all know why we don't want to do the hard stuff. Because we all know it sucks. And Lord knows I hate that feeling of dread around a task. Honestly, I think that would sum up my entire experience with anxiety, just dreading doing something. The effort required to talk to that friend or actually finish that essay properly is brain power that we naturally don't want to use because it could hurt, it could go wrong, or we could fail. It's an incredibly daunting task to face. But every time you face a task like this, in literally any aspect of your life, think of this question, because it might just change your mind. What will happen if you don't do the thing? There are a million different answers to that question, because of course there's lots of different things you could potentially be avoiding. But if we move away from the tangible things that could happen, and we just think about how avoiding it will make you feel, I can almost with perfect certainty say that you're going to feel stressed, sad, maybe even frustrated. That's why thinking about a caring mindset in tough situations is so incredibly important. If you just push past the feeling, suppress it, or even just let yourself sit in it for a really long time, you're actively removing all chance of peace in your space, in your brain. By doing the thing, you get closer to the peaceful bit when it's all over and you have time to rest and life is just that little bit less stressful. I was recently listening to a podcast by Mel Robbins, who, if you've never heard of her and you're looking for some weekly motivation, she is absolutely your gal. She was discussing how we so often sit with things, our stresses, our dreams, and our goals, but our fears mean that we never move on it. We just kind of leave them to be. And I think there is absolutely a connection here to not doing the things we want and not doing the things we need to do. The bit for me, though, is that every time I sit with the feeling of, oh, I should have done this, or this needed to be done a week ago, or I really just hate doing that, it just darkens every single moment I consider it and makes me not want to do it even more. Now think about that for a second. Every time I think about something that I could easily do or needs to be done, but don't, I get stressed, angry, or a real sense of dread. Like every single time, guaranteed. And that can amount to a lot of bad feelings. This is the key bit where self-care comes in. When you're actively engaging in self-care activities, i.e. mindfulness, relaxation techniques, and incorporating the chance to just breathe and slow down your day, your ability to manage your stress and your stressful tasks is so much better. They're not easier, I'll preface with that, they're not easier, but they are better. Okay, so the obvious question to all of this that I know you're probably sat there thinking is, well, okay, I should do the tough tasks to help with my peace of mind and keep a caring presence throughout my day. But how on earth do I do that? This is definitely another tricky question, mainly because the task could be anything from trying to be more efficient with your adult responsibilities, i.e. bills, chores, or it could be talking to somebody about something very, very scary. The options are kind of endless. I devised a few little tips, tricks, questions, and stuff to consider when you're going through the I need to sort this out headspaces and are perhaps more motivated than usual to deal with it. But the motivation isn't a requirement, so don't worry. You can approach this from any headspace. This is all the introspection you're going to need to self-care your way to a happier, peaceful, party of life. First, you actually gotta just simplify and know exactly what's going on. What is the situation? As the queen of overcomplicating things, I totally get how easy it is to add in all the factors and weigh up everything all at once instead of keeping it easy. If you can't explain it in 1 or 2 sentences less, you're making your life so much harder. Genuinely write it down if that's the exact issue you're facing. This will give you the space to remove not only the extra weight and fears around it because it's just words on a page, but it makes solving it much more straightforward. It's also good within your breakdown of the situation to consider why it's actually significant for you. Say you've had an argument. Is the person that you've had this argument with a really close friend? Say you need to call somebody and ask a few questions. Does getting the answer mean that something that's bothering you completely disappears? Do you just need to solve a bad habit? I will give you a brilliant example for this particular one. I am a pretty habitual coffee drinker, but I know for a fact that it's costing me a lot to fund this little habit when I know that there are absolutely more important things right now I need to be thinking about. And most importantly, I can just drink coffee at home. So the problem here is that I'm actually spending too much money on something that doesn't necessarily justify it. And that's important to me because that's a habit that could become something very difficult long term if I'm not careful with it. Now, I don't have to stop drinking coffee. I just need to be more conscious about how I am drinking coffee and whether or not it's having a negative impact on something I can control, quite simply. This is a small example, but ultimately it can be applied to everything. The significant part is that I don't want to spend more money on something that I could be using for something else. And the problem that I need to sort out is that I'm buying coffee in the first place. But I want to do it in a way that doesn't put me in a tricky situation. I want to be caring to myself and not miss out on the things I love. The second thing is acknowledging the barriers that are actually stopping you from wanting to do the thing. We'll stick with the coffee example just for simplicity. But I definitely recommend working through whatever is bothering you with the same approach. Start with the external stuff that's bothering you about this situation, i.e., I didn't have a coffee pot or a coffee machine for the longest time. And it also added onto my morning that I felt wasn't actually real at all, but I felt like it was preventing me from starting my day quicker if I was having to make coffee at home. Honestly, both of these excuses are pretty simple solves. I bought a single cup coffee pot, which has actually changed my life. And I worked out how long I would spend going to a coffee shop and buying the drink, and just marked out the same time to make coffee in the morning, which ironically doesn't take me as long. What's interesting after I did this was that almost instantly it became less justifiable in my head to go out and buy a coffee. I couldn't just excuse myself with my usual arguments, so I quickly just settled for making my homemade coffee, which is actually such a lovely little thing to do. Obviously, not every barrier is external, especially if you're dealing with something that relates to other people or something that isn't as small as a bad coffee habit. Internal barriers can be much harder to face, especially if it's linked to triggers or emotional elements of your life that you're not sure you want to face up to. And that's okay. We're here. We have the restful and anxiety tools to deal with the negativity. I will link a few of Galene's personal tools in the description. Be gentle with yourself because it might be really tough to face up to these, but it doesn't mean that whatever you're trying to solve has to be impossible. Okay, so make a little list. That's the recommendation here. What's making you hesitant or resistant to this? What are you scared of? It's okay if the answer feels a little silly or really, really, really big. It's a scary thing to sit and do, and that's why it's going to feel like that. But what you've just done is a huge thing. You've actually acknowledged why you're scared or why you're hesitant to do the task. And that in itself is huge. And you should be incredibly proud that you had the strength to say, yeah, I found this terrifying, and that's okay. Weirdly enough, the moment I started to admit to myself when something scared me, or the reasons behind why I didn't want to have that conversation or go do that thing, almost immediately meant that it lost its power. Its big scariness that made me anxious and sweat and all those horrid things. I actually have a really good story about this. When I was a teenager, I remember having exactly that situation when a couple of my close friends had hung out without me a couple times while I was incredibly busy with college work. As soon as I admitted to myself that I was scared that they didn't want to hang out with me anymore, I kind of had a moment of, oh, well, I actually know that that's not true because we have something planned next week when all my work's finished, and they also know I'm super busy, so I literally can't be there anyways. And that worry lost all its weight, and it actually allowed me to see the counter argument to my own fear almost instantly. And it made the process of talking to my friends and saying, oh man, it sucked that I didn't get to hang out with you guys last week, so much easier because I knew that they would be understanding about my FOMO. This little thought pattern I had following admitting my barrier to talking to my friends about what happened is actually the next step. Exploring the impact of the avoidance. The consequences of not talking to my friends and sharing that I was sad about missing out on the group hangouts would have meant that my anxiety would have stayed with me, and also built a false impression of the kind of friendships that I had. That kind of thing just eats away at your ability to be calm, especially if you're typically anxious, because it will always play on your mind of, did they deliberately not invite me? Do they enjoy hanging out with me? And ultimately it stops you from being compassionate to yourself and taking the time to show yourself the care you need in that moment. So think about this. What are the emotional consequences of not doing the activity? Stress or anxiety? Is it the feeling of being perpetually out of control? Is it a chaotic headspace? These emotions will give you the physical cost of avoiding the action too. For instance, avoiding this does XYZ to my well-being, or it makes my daily tasks harder to manage, or puts strain on my friendships. Avoiding the situation will affect your mental, emotional, and potentially physical health too. And it's good to know how it will impact you because it can be a really strong motivator to getting yourself to do it. The next part is reframing, which I'm pretty sure all of you will have heard of before. It's the classic of changing "I can't handle this" to "what can I handle right now?" There may be things you genuinely can't do right now, but there are always a multitude of realistic ways to view the situation. Positive ways too can reduce the thing to something that is mentally approachable for you. Sometimes it can help to talk this through with somebody else, if doing all this mental work is a little bit overwhelming. Or writing down can also be a really great way to process it. Kindness and care are the top priorities here. Don't force yourself into something that will make it worse. Take it incrementally. You deserve the mental space to deal with this all calmly and reduce its stressfulness as easily as possible. This will be more beneficial for certain tasks or problems, but break it down into smaller steps. The more manageable, the better. I will break down any task I do just like this, because not only does it make it feel like you're achieving it quicker, but it also physically feels easier to do. Something else that actually really helps, no matter the situation, and if you can manage it without overwhelming yourself, is visualization. It's one of those things that can feel a little bit silly in the moment, but scientifically, studies have really shown that your brain does not know the difference between imagining a situation and actually doing it. So envisioning yourself doing the difficult task, for your brain anyway, will mean that when you actually come to do it, it kind of thinks you've already done it before. The next bit is kind of the tough bit, which is doing it. But you've prepared yourself. You've given yourself every tool to make it all as easy as possible and diffuse any stress or anxiety you're feeling. I know it still may feel super, super hard, super difficult, and basically not it. But the pride you should take in giving yourself the care and space to figure out what's going on and how you actually want to approach it, instead of just ignoring it and letting it get worse, or just reacting impulsively, that can be as bad as well, is truly well deserved. You considered yourself first. You put your mental well-being at the forefront of it all and intentionally did what you needed to do. Even if you struggle to feel proud of yourself right now, I am bloody proud of you. No matter the result, success or not, I am proud that you did something difficult for you. That's such a win. And I will hype you up forever for doing it. Now, the aftercare. Wow, I made that sound like you've just, I don't know, had your hair permed or something, and I'm telling you not to shower. After any stressful thing, after doing something you did not enjoy or did not naturally want to do, some traditional, fun, soothing self-care is obviously 100% recommended. Go have your bubble bath. But seriously, planning something enjoyable and calming after a stressful event, big or small, is worth the mental space. Think of it this way. Imagine you have a day of very stressful meetings and interviews that you have been dreading for weeks. Initially, you put off doing the prep work because the whole idea of that day just overwhelmed you. But after listening to this podcast, you decided to face your fears, figure out what's actually going on, come up with your caring action plan to do the prep, and you got through it. In fact, you probably killed it, whether you were successful or not. You absolutely deserve the ultimate restful experience post something hard, even if your situation isn't that big, i.e. you just had that one call to make that was going to just be super uncomfortable. You deserve a second to chill after that. In these moments, it's the ultimate restful activities you should go to, snugglies and all, the hot shower, the fresh sheets, the new pajamas. Maybe even takeout, if that's the kind of vibe you're feeling. Your calm state should be switched on to the max. For me, perhaps unsurprisingly, a hot shower, a good movie, and some sort of treat are what I dream for in these moments. Comfort food, a warm blanket, and chill, like that is just idyllic. And those are the feelings I want to tap into when I've done something stressful. If it's summer, which definitely seems to be avoiding the UK right now, going out to some green space, putting out a picnic blanket, reading for a while. It's just utterly bliss. If you don't have the opportunity to do your self-care routine straight after because you have other work planned or events to do, of course, that's totally normal and totally okay. But do make a point of scheduling some high-level self-care into your diary to make that celebratory break you 100% deserve. So, just to give you a little summary, because that was a lot of information, here's your step-by-step guide to dealing with something tough using a self-care approach. Number 1, nail down exactly what the situation is. Number 2, figure out the specific internal and external barriers making you not want to do the thing. Number 3, explore that barrier, that fear, whatever comes up for you, and bring it down to earth and its actual size. Number 4, reframe it into something possible. What actions can you take right now, however small? They need to be for you to get through this. If you need to, number 5, visualize doing the thing. It will make your brain feel like it's already done it before. Number 6, do the thing. Pretty obvious. Number 7, make sure you have a self-care after plan and give yourself the mental space to breathe and return to a relaxing state of mind. So there it is, the way to have self-care magic away all your tough decisions and tasks. No matter what you're experiencing, a little self-care really can go a long way in making a tough decision so much easier and calmer. We have loads of resources on how to de-stress and manage anxiety on the Galene Company website. So if you're looking for something specific, chances are we might have it. If you took this episode to take a moment for yourself, congratulations, you're living with self-care in mind. If not, make sure you find some time soon, because there is nothing more calming than time to unwind and reset. The next episode will be announced on Wednesday on our Instagram @GaleneCompany_, and our weekly self-care tea newsletter, which I don't think I've spoken about on this podcast yet. So definitely check that out. Our self-care tea newsletter, the Galene Tea, is always there to keep your self-care inspired and wonderful. We have just added a bunch of new team members to Galene, so there are loads and loads of new things coming up on there, so definitely worth checking out. Until next time, take care of yourself, please, because you deserve it.